to. This, to me, is how you write a tie-in to a cosmic Marvel super event.
I didn't even realize this was supposed to be a tie-in.
Oh, really?
I literally didn't even see the giant
symbiote Earth.
Nope, didn't see that at all.
So this is Ewing is doing really well here. He is just give him props. This is the perfect example of how you're supposed to write a tie-in for an event, which is really odd to say because, Ewing was the other hand of Empire, right? And I feel like Ewing's writing this as like and I know this is totally misrepresented and it's just not exactly what it is, but I feel like Ewing is writing this book to apologize for Empire
No.
because he's doing such a good job, man. Like, okay, so Ten of Swords, or I'm sorry, it's not Ten of Swords. S.W.O.R.D is about the mutants on the S.W.O.R.D base, right? And what's, like, for you as a reader, what's the first thing you're thinking about when there's an X-Men title that is interwoven with the Null event? What's the first question that you're going to think of when you know the premise of this book?
I don't know.
But
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay, so it's what's going on in Krakoa right now with the Earth being completely absorbed in symbiote goo.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, we have a taste of X-Men in the main book, but we don't know what's going on in Krakoa, and that's exactly what we get here because the Ten of Swords base, outside of defending Earth, Ten of Swords, the S.W.O.R.D base is to defend Earth, but also to defend Krakoa, and so Abigail Brand, being the person that she is, she knows that there are very, very important assets on Krakoa, and she's going to do whatever it takes to get those assets. And we're talking about the 5. We're talking about the Resurrection Protocol within Krakoa. Outside of Professor X and maybe Moira, the 5 are the most valuable thing on Krakoa. And so she basically, it takes longer till the end of the book to find out what she's doing, but she has this protocol V, which is basically 5, to get the 5, to basically go get those 5 and get them off Earth because they're in jeopardy, because the entire Earth is covered in symbiote goo. And so that's what we get in this book. We get more background on our characters. We find out that the S.W.O.R.D base can literally destroy a symbiote dragon in one shot, which is really fucking cool. And we see that Abigail at this particular moment is kind of scraping the barrel when it comes to the mutants that she has at her disposal.
Right.
And that's evident in the telepath that she uses, which is Moloch or
Mentalo.
Mantalo.
Yeah, Mantalo. I don't know. I've never run across him before.
I think it's Mantalo, and this is again where we dive into this whole idea that the X writers at the X office dive deep, and I have no idea who this character is, but when I watched Comic Book Herald's video, he did a real big deep dive of this character, and the dude's really into tanks, and he's really into money, and he doesn't give a shit about Krakoa. He's all about gaining as much power as he can, and more specifically, wealth, physical cash. And what I like about this book is we see more insight into Abigail Brand and her profiling of teams within the base, and she straight out calls it we can't trust this dude, but it's the best I got, and I need him right now. And she does the same thing with Magneto's friend. What's his name? The guy that can the mutant that can basically enhance mutant powers to make them stronger. I forget his name. Cortez. And apparently Cortez, again, don't know anything about this character, but he's a dick. He's a douchebag, and he is in the same boat as Manilo. He craves power. He craves influence. And so right off the bat, Abigail has basically said, at some point we need to get rid of these guys because they're going to be a thorn in my side, and I'll deal with their shit. So Abigail basically knows that not every mutant on Krakoa can really be trusted, and to be putting them in positions of power is very dangerous. But she's going to utilize them until they've, until they're spent, and then she'll get rid of them. So they take a team down to Earth, to Krakoa, to extract the 5, to see what the situation is down there. It's bad. There's no sun because the entire planet is covered in goo. And so it's snowing on Krakoa, and we get a really epic battle with Magneto and Sunspot, I believe.
Sunspot.
Mm-hmm. Sunspot, yep. And they are defending Krakoa as hard as they can. And then at some point, Sunspot gets like smacked by one of the dragons, and he literally breaks every bone in his body. Just and that's when our S.W.O.R.D group.
Because Sunspot was such a dick.
And you can kind of tell in that book too a little bit. Anyway, he gets slapped around, breaks like his legs and his arms, and they're like, "Hey, we need to keep on fighting." And he's like, "I can still fight." And Magneto's, it's one of the mutants is like, "Dude, your legs are broken. You can't do shit. Like, you're done, bro." And then Cortez goes up to him and says, "No, don't worry about it." And he gives this really cool like mystic speech about like, you need to rise and be more powerful, and I give you this gift. And he's being so dramatic because that's who he is. Like, he's a douchebag, and he's for the flair, right? And it kind of makes sense with his power. He enhances and makes mutants more powerful, and so he's gonna have a flair for the dramatic. And his history is that he did this with Magneto, and Magneto basically used him as like a drug, where he was like addicted to his power enhancement. And so there's a relationship there, and Cortez uses this to his favor. He ends up super omega powering Sunspot to the point where Sunspot becomes Krakoa's new sun, and just like sheds so much light on the island, and kills the symbiote dragon at the same time. And so after this whole incident, Cortez goes to is it Cortez?
Yeah, Cortez.
He goes to Magneto and is like, "Hey, I'd really like to talk or get in front of the Quiet Council." And Magneto kind of goes like, "Yeah, I can see what I can do about that." And so it's already, people are already kind of starting to fall back into their old ways, and one of our other mutants on S.W.O.R.D sees this and kind of calls it out, but to her, like, under her breath. So we might actually start, we may be going into the direction of actual, like, the council starting to fall apart a little bit, because we're getting influencers and actors that may not necessarily have the island in their best interest. So we get a little bit of that in this book, which I thought was really cool. And then Mantelo, that guy ends up showing up on the island with a tank to basically extract the 5 and get them onto the S.W.O.R.D base. What I found interesting in this book is it didn't seem like they were doing it for Krakoan's sake, but for Abigail's sake. Like, Abigail is actively trying to get assets onto the S.W.O.R.D base in her own interest for her mission, rather than Krakoa. That's what it seems like. So it seems like he's going to successfully extract the 5, but before they can get in the tank, or no, I don't know if it happens to them or if it happens to the main team. Basically, what we find out is that Cable has been touched by the symbiote goo, and now is a symbiote working for Null, and it's pretty fucking scary when he shows up.
It took me forever to figure out who that was supposed to be.
Really?
Like, I look at it now and it's super obvious, but the like showl that's over his head, I thought that was supposed to be the key thing, and then I was like, well, is it Domino? Or like, what's going on with the eye? And then finally that was what, like, oh, I guess it's Cable. And then just now I'm like, motherfucker, he's got a huge sword and a big gun. Like, how did you not get it was Cable?
And he's got a metal arm.
Okay, and see, I still didn't notice that part either. I must have been sleepy or something.
I guess, dude. Anyway, he shows up at the end and he's like, "To me, my X-Men," but he's talking like Null's talking through him.
Right.
And so that's how the issue ends. So S.W.O.R.D's now got to deal with a nullified Cable, which that sounds absolutely terrifying. So we'll see if they get the 5 off. I'm assuming they are, but I think what I love about this book is Ewing is putting in a lot of internal conflict that's like setting up for later on down the road. And so I'm really intrigued with Cortez and him trying to get in front of the council, and I'm really, really want to know what Abigail's doing. Like, you know, is she really going to be the reason why the Skrull and Kree Empire really falls, or is there, you know, I feel like she's.
No, I think that your initial response is exactly
probably pretty exactly what it is. I don't. It's not that I don't get good vibes from her, but she definitely has her own interest in hand outside of the plant of the island, which to me as an X-Men reader is concerning because like I know it's gonna fail, but fuck, how is it gonna fail? Anyway, I really enjoyed this issue. I thought the artwork was great, and just the pacing in this book was fantastic. And this was almost my pick of the week. It was very close until I finished the rest of my reads. But I enjoyed it a lot. I'm really digging S.W.O.R.D, and I'm happy about it because, you know, outside of Fallen Angels, I've really enjoyed all of the X books. And, you know, all of them have their weaknesses, all of them have their strengths. This book, I feel like, is the most in tuned to Hickman's direction.
Yeah.
And I think that's because Ewing is so good at pulling, just like in Marauders, is so good at pulling at past events and past characters and really diving deep into their history and making you want to know more about what the hell's going on and who this character is. And I just think he's done his homework. And that's not to say that other X books that don't do their homework aren't fun to read. I fucking love Hellions. Hellions has been a fantastic, fun read, and it's just like a really cool like getaway book. At the same time, just because it's like that doesn't mean that it doesn't have pillars of Hickman within the book. Like there are definitely things going on in those books that are going to creep up in other books within the X stories. But overall, Hellions is just a fun ride, right? And S.W.O.R.D feels like another X-Men book, like literally a book that could be right next to Hickman in importance in his X-Men run. So yeah. I enjoyed it. I don't know about you.
No, I loved it. I mean, anything that's space, I love. Anything that's X-Men, I love. If it's X-Men in space, you basically can't fail for me.
Right. So I anticipate.
Also, I love Valerio Schiti's art. Like, I'm so glad that he is on this book with Ewing. Like, it really feels like even like the art makes it feel like a continuation of the cosmic story we were getting from Empire, and a much more elevated way.
I just feel like there's a lot more detail in this book than some of the books that Ewing was doing in Empire. Like, I felt like Empire was so rushed, and in this one, I don't know. I just feel like he's able to spread his arms out a little bit, his arms and legs, and really like dive into the material that is X-Men. He's just kicking ass at it. Like, you get books like this, and you're like, hell yeah! But then you get Empire, and you're like, what were y'all doing? Like, what happened? Like, what did, you know, who told you no, basically? Because I feel like in this book, there's no, like, it's like, yeah, do what you want. Let's have some fun. And he's doing it, but he also has so much weight and consequence in his book. And I'm just like, this is what I want, you know? Like, this is, and I know that some people, like, again, like Gem Mint jumped off, or no, he didn't actually. He didn't like issue 1, but he really enjoyed issue 2. Like, he said that in his reviews, like, no, I could get behind this. So, you know, I think Ewing is hopefully he can stay the course on this book and continue that momentum. I really, you know, now that I know that like issue 7 is the make or break for most of these issues, I'm cautiously optimistic that this book will continue to deliver.